All right, I just walked back out to my vehicle, and it's still freezing. So it was 31 when I got up this morning. I think I've had enough of this. I'm ready for March weather again. Live in the Bank Plus studio, Out of Bounds 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be Blue, the official health care provider of the Out of Bounds show. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. We want to welcome in our friend Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN, also national on recruiting, and he joins us on the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale guest line. Lugs, good morning. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. I know it's a little chilly where I'm at, too. I don't know if I like this. I think we got spoiled being 75 in late November.
I don't think there's any question that I did. There's no doubt. But, here we go going into the wintertime. You know what's pretty cool is that we've still got more games in December, which usually doesn't – that doesn't happen, but it does because of COVID. How do you see this? Yeah. There's been talk that some people would love for the college football season to start October 1 instead of September 1 because it will be a little bit cooler. Would you go for that or no?
Well, as a field analyst who has to wear a shirt and tie and dress clothes when it's 112, yeah, I'd go for that. But I don't want to wait that long for it. I got to be honest with you. A few degrees here and there. There's still something pretty cool about summer leaking into the fall and having those temperatures. And you've got the co-eds out. Everybody's having a big outdoor party. And then you kind of blend into the fall with the sports still being played. I don't know if I would enjoy it if you just started out with the temperatures being cooler.
Fair enough. Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show. Lugs, we've got this is a big game in Starkville this weekend because Mississippi State feels like they've got a shot to win the game. The spread is 7 points. It's in Starkville. Auburn has good players. They're just not a good team. And so as you have watched a good bit of Auburn and Mississippi State this year, size it up for me. Does Mississippi State have a chance to win this game?
Well, yes, and I think for two reasons. One, if there was ever a game where Mississippi State has a tremendous opportunity to run the football, it's this one. Because Auburn has not been able to recover from the losses that they had along that defensive front. I thought they would be much further along, much more established depth. Auburn's been known for being a great defensive football team for decades, and they haven't been able to rebound from those losses. So I think if Mississippi State, and you're wanting to see if you can get some semblance of a run game going, I know we've talked about it on this show every week, this may be the week. That's number one. Number two, I think anytime you're playing against Bo Nix, you have the opportunity for at least one, if not two, turnovers as a direct result of him. And either being silly with the football, trying to make too much happen, throwing into double and triple coverage. And if you get those opportunities, you've got to score points. You've got to capitalize. But Bo Nix, I think you said it, they've got good players, but maybe not good football players, as in that, Bo Nix has talent. He's got a strong arm. He's a good athlete. He's got size, strength. But whatever it is, something's not clicking with decisions and consistent effectiveness at the position. And I think Mississippi State's got to take advantage of that.
Is Bo Nix Shea Patterson in that by the time he was in 10th grade, he was great and he was dominant, which allowed him to be dominant in his 11th and 12th grade year. But at that time, 15, 16 years old, he had maxed out. He was what he was going to be. Your thoughts?
Potentially. Now, in my estimation, Bo Nix physically had far better physical tools, bigger, faster, stronger. Shea Patterson was 6 foot, 210 pounds, and I do believe he was somewhat maxed out coming out. But Bo's a better athlete. But there is some validity in what you're saying there, because when you're not seeing, and again, I understand that Bo is a true sophomore. All right, everybody's gotten an extra year of eligibility. So maybe this thing's more of a slow burn for him. Maybe there needs to be a different approach offensively. Something's not clicking. Either they're not, accentuating his strengths and trying to mask his weaknesses, or in some way sticking a square peg into a round hole. But something's missing, because I don't think that he was at his ceiling coming out the way I thought Shea was. And so it'll be interesting to see. He just may be, listen, I hate to say it because, we're talking about young players, but this is part of the danger in recruiting is you're trying to get, especially at the quarterback position, you're trying to gather all of this information and you're trying to assess this and assess that. And you're sitting there going, okay, he's a coach's kid. He's being coached by his dad. He's got all the physical traits. He won at the high school level. Where is he in terms of, overall accuracy and all? You're trying to evaluate all these things, and then you get the guy and something's missing. And you're going back and you're trying to go, how did we not identify this? Or where was the disconnect? And that doesn't just apply to a Bo Nix or an Auburn. That's everybody in recruiting, particularly with the quarterback position. And it's very, very frustrating, and it makes it very, very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, could it be the bottom line is he was just overrated and overhyped coming out of high school?
Oh, sure. But I think that can be applied to a lot of guys. In fact, I think I would dare to say more guys are overhyped and overrated coming out of high school than they are actually legit.
Sure.
Because
we're going through that right now, the last week of going into signing day.
Yeah. There you go. All you have to go on is what the guy has done during his high school career, how he's performed in games, how he's performed in camp, what are his physical attributes. And aside from that, I mean, I can go down and run through our database of just about any class over the last 15 years and see 50% of the guys we had graded high didn't pan out.
Right.
I mean, and the thing is, that's not exclusive to those of us in the scouting and evaluation side of things, or, the coverage of recruiting. The guys that signed them found that out too.
All right. As someone who headed up ESPN's recruiting team, walk us through, break down how your criteria for evaluating players.
Well, first and foremost, the most important question that you've got to get an answer to that is often not asked enough is very simple. Does the player love the game? A lot of players like the game. A lot of players like getting recruited. Not everybody loves the game enough to do the things you have to do if you really want to be great. Not good, just great. All right? So that's the number one thing that we're always trying to find out about it, particularly at quarterback, but at all positions. And then you're trying to gather as much verifiable data, objective data as you can. Stuff where you're not making an opinion. You're sitting there going, okay, this guy is this tall, he weighs this much, his hand size is this, his arm length is that. He did the L cone drill, he did the short shuttle, he did the 40. We're going to gather all those sorts of things. And those things are great markers. They're great identifiers for potential future success. You start to combine that, and then what I think it comes down to is how it is that you break down the actual film of the prospects that you are watching. So you'll hear the phrase hit tape, or you'll hear the phrase good, bad, and ugly. So let's just say we'll use Bo Nix as an example. We're going to say, okay, here's Bo Nix, and we're going to take 15 plays where he was exceptional, 15 plays where he was marginal, and 15 plays where he was downright awful. Put them all on the tape. Then we may say, okay, I want to see Bo Nix on third down in the second half of the games in which the two best opponents he faced. All right, what are those? And then we pull all those. So you can take, based off of what your criteria is, based off of what you think is important, you can take all of those things. And I learned a lot of this over the years, but Greg Madison, the former defensive coordinator at Michigan, who was with Urban Meyer at Florida, he said one of the things he always loved to do is he loved to see how a kid played against the team's best rival and against the best team on their schedule. Not just because he knew it was going to be good competition. He wanted to see if the kid cared and had pride in beating the rival or beating the best player. So, again, you're trying to create all of these data points. and somehow come up with a formula that is going to afford you the ability to be right 65% or more of the time. Now, with that being said, let's just say you sign 25 guys. That means you're going to miss on 8 or 9, even if you're at that number. The question is, which 8 or 9 or 10 guys is it? Are they the ones that you thought were going to be the best? Are they ones that you thought were going to be okay? And that makes a big difference too. So not to get too long-winded, but we could go on for hours and hours and hours on all the different little details that go into this thing. But it's an inexact science. It always has been. It always will be. But the devil's always in the details as well. The more information you can gather, the more chance you have of hitting on a guy.
All right, which position is more difficult to evaluate, quarterback or offensive line?
Oh, I knew you were going to say those two. I'm actually going to say offensive line. And I say that because at the high school level, when a kid is 6'5", 295, 6'6", 315, guess what? Against 98% of normal high school players, he's going against a defensive lineman that is 6'1", 217, or 5'11", 185, or even on the bigger end, 6'2", 240. And guess what? Those guys just ragdoll those kids. So you're sitting there trying to figure out, all right, what would this guy do if he was matched up against somebody that could actually not only physically challenge him, but mentally get into his head because he's not used to being the most dominant player on the field, or at least on the line of scrimmage. And I can tell you right now, Bo, when we get those kids down for the last 12 years at the Under Armour All-America game, or 13 years, and we're there for that week, it is the single greatest evaluation tool of offensive linemen you could possibly want at the high school level. And unfortunately, it happens too late because you get all of those guys in pads, full pads, and they're doing full-blown one-on-ones or twos-on-twos or inside 9-on-7. And for the first time, you know, a Greg Little is going against a Jadeveon Clowney or, you know, somebody in the same realm. And you find out real quickly what the offensive kid is made of, because they're either going to go in the tank and they're not going to be able to handle it, or they're going to rise to the occasion and they're going to come back and they're going to compete, whether it's the next rep, whether it's the next series, whether it's the next day. And it tells you an awful lot about which of those guys are ready to make that jump to the next level.
Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst on the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale guest line, talking recruiting. So when you I'm trying to think here. Okay, I got one. Here's a guy who literally nobody was really talking about, and then he all of a sudden became a 5-star overnight. Chris Jones. When you saw Chris Jones, because Chris really wasn't even considered a top 5, top 10 prospect here until late. And then all of a sudden,
Alabama All-Star game.
Yeah, and then things just took off. So what happened when you saw Chris Jones at the Under Armour All-American game?
Well, first off, the better question is, how did we not get on that kid earlier? I mean, when you have his type of measurables, you don't hide, and Mississippi State has done a great job of hiding him, but it's hard to hide those guys when they look like that. So it's like, how did we not get on this kid? Once we got on to him, then you could see that, number one, here's the other thing. The difference with a kid like that and other kids that look like that is he didn't have the luxury of having the spotlight shined on him. He had a chip on his shoulder because he didn't have the spotlight, and he couldn't figure out why, if that makes sense. Because here I am, I'm this massive, strong, athletic, explosive defensive lineman. I'm right smack dab in the middle of the southeast portion of the country, and really nobody knows who I am. So he goes into it with a different temperament and a different mindset, because in his mind, he's got to prove himself every single snap. And so that gave him, I think, a bit of a mental edge over some of the other kids that had received accolades, that had been highly recruited, and they were national names if you were covering recruiting. And as a result, he had a remarkable week. I mean, it was one of those kids that you could say, okay, if this guy was going to Alabama, or he was going to LSU, or he was going to Auburn or Florida or Georgia or Ohio State or whatever, he could have gone there and done the same thing that he did at Mississippi State. That's how talented he was.
You know, that first year, his freshman year, true freshman,
Yeah.
It was obvious in the Egg Bowl that Laramie Tunsil and Chris Jones were the best two players on the field, and they were
Oh
still
yeah.
young, Tom.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. And again, at those premium positions that I talk about all the time: quarterback, defensive cornerback, offensive line, and defensive line. So when you're a dominant force at those positions, you're going to play and you're going to be asked to do a lot. Some of it you're not going to do overly well, but when you're on the field, you're going to stand out.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show. Blake, you got a question for Luke's?
Tom, it's funny that you just said premium positions because this whole time you've been talking, and anytime we get into the recruiting discussion, Bo and I always come back to it's so interesting when they rank a weak side or like not even like a inside linebacker gets the number one ranking over a quarterback, a receiver, a defensive edge rusher. So can you talk about why there's maybe been the scouting part of football has been slow to adopt the idea of positional value when ranking high school players? It's just like they just look at someone and say, hey, here's the ranking, even though he may not be able to contribute, that guard may not contribute for 3 years at Mississippi State or Ole Miss, and this guy could contribute day one because of his position.
Well, I'll say this, and not to combat you, I would say that you picked the wrong position in your comparison, probably not intentionally, but a linebacker, a middle linebacker, somebody like that's probably never going to be ranked over certainly hasn't with us, a quarterback or an offensive tackle or a corner or what have you. But if you go back over the last 15 years and you look at our rankings, particularly the top 10 of 15, regardless of position, our rankings are often going to mirror NFL draft style of projection in the sense that there are very few, what you mentioned and I call premium position players. Everybody wants them. There's not enough of them. There's a reason why Alabama and Clemson and LSU over the years, Auburn over the years, Georgia, Florida have been dominant programs, and it's not because of the skill guys. The skill guys are everywhere. We could throw a rock outside right now and hit a receiver. You can find them everywhere. You can't find the offensive linemen. You can find them, but there's so few of them that you've got all of the sharks swimming in the water, and all the big dogs are going to end up with them. Well, when you project that to the National Football League draft, go look at the draft. I mean, rarely. I look at our 2008 recruiting classes. It's the only time that we've had two wide receivers in the top five. You know who they were? A.J. Green and Julio Jones.
Wow.
It's the only time. Everybody else, every other year, we may have had one in that top 10 or that top 5, but we didn't have two. We certainly didn't have three. But if you look at it, you can go back to 2009, you can go back to 2013, whatever you want to do. Pull up the top 10 or 15, and it's going to be offensive linemen, defensive linemen, corners, maybe a quarterback, all right, and then some type of probably dominant athlete type guy that either we're not quite sure where he's going to go, where he's going to project, but we know he's a force. So like Derrick Henry comes to mind for me. We had him in the athlete category. He was a top 10 overall player. Weren't necessarily convinced he was going to play running back just because of his stature. I mean, he looked like a defensive end, outside linebacker. Turns out he could play running back. But a lot of teams didn't recruit him to play running back. So it really is important to place emphasis on those guys because those are the guys, and it's no different than any other sport. Basketball, baseball, football. What do? You build your team from the inside out, not the outside in. And that's why we place such an emphasis on those positions. And we know there's going to be great receivers. Listen, look at Clemson. Clemson is not Clemson because of Justin Ross and Martavius Bryant and Sammy Watkins. No, Clemson is Clemson because of their front and their quarterback.
Right. Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Let's wrap it up with this, Luke's. We got a couple of minutes here. Shane Beamer hired at South Carolina. I'll put you on the spot. We know Shane from his days at Mississippi State. Nice guy.
Yep.
If his name was
Great
Shane
guy.
Smith, he doesn't get the job, but he did get it, and he does have a chance to make this happen, but he's kind of got to Pittman this thing and make two excellent coordinator hires because he's never called a play or been a head coach.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on this hire?
I think there was some financial implications involved in it, given the COVID environment and the fact that you just paid off $13 million. to Will Muschamp, and when you made overtures to some other coaches you were interested in, their price tag was probably double, at least double, what Shane's would be. And that's not to take away from Shane's ability to coach and recruit and do all those sorts of things. And as you mentioned, we know him. He's a great guy. But you're right. He's going to have to make really good hires, and he's going to have to hire a bunch of grinders in recruiting. I mean, absolute grinders in recruiting that go out and just knock down the doors. And he inherited a fairly talented roster. This isn't a 2-10 roster.
I
can
agree.
assure you of that. And on top of that, he's also inheriting a program that is less than 2 years into one of the most state-of-the-art football operations facilities in America. And it was something that South Carolina had never had before. So there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle already in place. But I would agree with you. It comes down to hires and then what they're able to do on the recruiting front. Because when you look at the SEC East now, you've got Georgia, you've got Florida, all right? But Kentucky's a problem now. They didn't used to be a problem. Still trying to figure out where Tennessee's going, the direction that thing's headed. You've got Clemson within your own state. I have, and this isn't a knock on Shane Beamer, but I was talking with Jim Donnan, former Marshall and Georgia head coach last week, and we were kind of talking just jobs that may come open. And he said, you know what? He goes, one of the things I always would do when I was considering hiring somebody is the first question I would ask is my greatest competitor or my in-state rival, would they hire this guy? And I thought it was a really great question because essentially what you're saying is, would Clemson hire him to be the head coach?
Well, not today. They did in a weird way with Dabo 13, 14 years ago through the interim thing. But no, today Clemson would not hire Shane Beamer. No.
And so I thought it was an interesting question and an interesting thought process.
Interesting.
When considering hiring. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we don't have time, but we'll have to get into, now that you got 10 coaches, is the recipe to hire 4 excellent coaches, OC, DC, special teams, and offensive line coach, and not that they can't recruit, and then 6 guys that can, like you said, go grind in different territories around the Southeast. But we'll hit that.
I'll tell you what I'd do real quick.
Yeah.
We can talk about this next week. If I was building it, I'd get 2 coordinators that all they do is coach. All the other position coaches, all they do is recruit, and the coordinators tell the position coaches, this is how I want it coached.
We'll leave it there. Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. Thanks, Luke. Appreciate you.
All right, guys. Take care.
That segment was brought to you by Havana Smoke Shop. 2 locations in the metro area, I-55 North, and new location across from Shaggy's at the Reservoir. That's Havana Smoke Shop for all your premium cigars, like Fuentes, Perdomos, La Flor Dominicanas, Liga Privadas. You name it, they got it at Havana Smoke Shop. Hour number 2 coming up. Yes, John Lewis from Germantown committed to MSU.